and our student member as well. At this time, Mr. Mike Gesford will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This time we'll have approval of the agenda. Is there a motion, please? Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Have any discussion of the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor? Okay. We have a unanimous vote. The student member concurs. So we have an approved agenda. We'll move to approval of the minutes.
President Williams, I move for the approval of the closed session minutes dated Tuesday, April 5th, 2022.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the closed session of April 5th, 2022? All those in favor of approval? Okay, so we have 6 abstaining, 1 abstention. You're throwing me for a loop there, Dr. Zentmeyer. Mrs. Murray?
President Williams, I move for the approval of the business meeting minutes dated Tuesday, April 5th, 2022.
Second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. All right, we're voting to approve the April 5th business meeting minutes. All those in favor? All right, 6 affirmative, abstentions, 1. Thank you, Mr. Gesford. So we have both sets of minutes approved. Thank you. This time we'll have public comment. I have one individual who has signed up in advance. And before I call that individual, I'd like to read from Board Policy KD. Under Roman numeral 3, Policy Statement and Procedures, Section A, Procedures at Business Meeting, Number 1. Each person wishing to address the Board of Education is encouraged but not required to sign up prior to the meeting and may address any topic concerning Washington County Public Schools except personnel or student matters which clearly identify an individual or individuals. Each speaker may speak for up to 5 minutes. Member Bickford is our timekeeper. Do you want to explain what we have?
Yellow means you have about 30 seconds left, and red means to wrap up.
At this time, Mr. Dan Litton, if you'd like to come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. I am Mr. Litton, a teacher at Antietam Academy. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Michael for his 43 years of experience and insight, and I hope you enjoy a well-deserved retirement. Many people look at the fallout of making a decision. Few understand the scope and predetermination that goes into making a decision and have the forethought of the fallout before decisions are executed. Dr. Michael and board, thank you for your years of understanding, vision, and implementation to move this county forward with each decision you have made. As far as Antietam Academy, where we are currently revising our vision statement, to this point it is assisting students in realizing their full potential, socially, emotionally, behaviorally, and academically, so that they can be empowered and productive citizens of their schools and community. Now, the daily effort to support this vision needs scope, perspective, and years of understanding that sometimes can't be developed by onlookers who have not walked miles in the proverbial shoes. I am privileged to have experienced leadership for several years under the tenured hand of Mr. Morrow, and I wish him continued success at his current placement. The new leadership of Antietam Academy, Dr. Kane Kirkpatrick, coordinator, and Ms. Dumas, vice principal, during this post-trauma COVID recovery year, their dedication has been untiring. They are unwavering in commitment to their vision, and they and the staff of Antietam have been rewarded through student reading score growth and in trauma awareness and recovery by some students. I believe the efforts and commitment by administrators, staff, WCPS administration, and community will continually move Antietam students and WCPS students toward a positive light as we create distance with COVID and embrace our vision. Now here comes the uh-oh. So during times when a fully funded budget has not been approved, it is difficult to ask for additional items, but I would like you to consider aid for our students through the means of mental health and addiction supports. Okay, the uh-oh is over. And now I would like to invite you all to Antietam Academy's Family-Centered Literacy Day on Saturday, May 7th from 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I wish WCPS continued success and growth as we transition and welcome new leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Litton. Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward to speak? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Chris Detro. I think y'all are familiar with me. I recently learned that my daughter would need two world language credits to graduate from high school. It's nothing new. That's been in effect for a long time. But my daughter, who's profoundly deaf, she still struggles greatly with English, which is her third language. So asking her to learn Spanish or French in order to graduate is going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for her and for many other deaf students who rely on ASL, which is a visual language, to communicate. This would be a big barrier to her for graduation. She's a straight A student. She's extremely intelligent, but just that language barrier is difficult. Another thing that would make her learning a foreign language difficult is that in her case, finding a qualified interpreter who is also fluent in that language would be extremely difficult, if not impossible. Washington County was blessed with an interpreter who was amazing, who was also fluent in Spanish, and he has been instrumental in the past for helping some deaf students graduate, but unfortunately he has passed away. It was a big loss for the deaf community. So I feel, and I just have talked to many people in the deaf community, the clear solution to this problem would be for Washington County to offer American Sign Language as a world language. Someone recently asked me, well, why would your daughter need to have a American Sign Language class? They use American Sign Language every day. And I understand that they did not mean any harm with this statement, but it clearly shows autism, which is a discrimination or prejudice against the deaf. Why do hearing kids go to English every single year of their schooling life? Because English is a full and complete language with its own grammar and syntax and rules, and it breaks its own rules all the time. It's very confusing. But ASL is the same. ASL is not English in signs. ASL is its own language. It has its own rules, its own grammar, its own fundamental features of language. It's full, it's complete, it's rich, it's beautiful, and deaf kids need to learn ASL too, just like hearing kids need to learn English or whatever language that they speak. ASL is the fourth most used language in the United States, and Maryland has 1.2 million deaf and hard of hearing residents. Because of our proximity to Maryland School for the Deaf, Gallaudet, which is the only deaf university in the world, we have a large deaf population. It just makes sense for the students of Washington County Public Schools to learn to interact with the deaf community that we have in a meaningful way. Other counties, Frederick, Carroll, Montgomery, Anne Arundel, Howard, as well as many local private schools have already made this an option for their students. And there is such a huge interest. If I had a nickel for every time a teenager or even an adult said to me, I want to learn, I wish I could learn, I wish I could talk to her, I would start my own school because I'd be rich. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that the demand for ASL interpreters is projected to rise between 24% or more between 2020 and 2030. The interpreter population is aging. There are not enough young, qualified people who are entering this field. So there, especially here, there is a huge lack of ASL interpreters. I'm so thankful for the interpreters that we have now. My daughter's been super blessed this year, but it has not been an easy road, and you all have received my emails, and you know that. And my daughter has had to advocate for herself the way a sixth grader never should have had to advocate for herself. It's because there are not interpreters to be found. It's very difficult to find great interpreters. So why not expose these students to ASL now and let them know, hey, this is, if you enjoy this, there's a career path that you could go down. There's many local colleges, FCC, Catonsville Community College, McDaniel College, just to name a few, who have wonderful interpreter programs. So it would be a really valid way to attract people to the interpreting field at the same time as exposing them to a new language. Many kids are kinesthetic learners. They do not pick up even English or Spanish or German or whatever, but they would pick up ASL, so this is a way to serve them as well. An ASL program would also give CODAs, or children of deaf adults, a chance to shine and be leaders and share about their unique experience in deaf culture as hearing native ASL users. The Maryland Department of Education now recognizes ASL instruction as an area of certification. The deaf community is vibrant, beautiful, and unique. Learning ASL is a wonderful way to immerse yourself in their culture and provide the access and inclusion they deserve. There's many benefits for the deaf and the hearing. So I hope that's something we're able to put some thought into.
Thank you, Ms. Detro. Anyone else? Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Ethan Lowen, and I'm here to support the parents that have been contacting this board because they feel betrayed that you have picked a curriculum that attempts to teach a worldview instead of teaching facts. This 3R curriculum, as it is called, that parents have discovered is being taught in our schools without their knowledge. It discusses gender the same way that CRT discusses race. And these curriculums exist because public school leaders believe that the way they want our children to think is superior to the knowledge and care that parents use to raise their children. The academic terminology for this is social engineering, which is when the government attempts to force the people, or in this case children, to shape their worldview to suit whomever is in charge at the time. It is the norm in socialist countries, but we have never allowed this in America. Social engineering damages children because it attempts to replace the child-parent bond with the government as both parent and teacher, which is why parents have become active on school boards all over America as online learning during COVID opened up their eyes to how deeply our public schools have sank into social engineering. The choice is clear. This board must remove all social engineering curriculum. I would also ask this board to allow the head of our local teachers union to speak on these issues without any time limit for him. It's important because the National Teachers Union is very vocal in their support of social engineering. As a result, a transparent local union is necessary for the community to trust its public schools. And it is no longer just the children that are suffering the consequences. A Minnesota bill has introduced a new standard for public schools. The bill is HF 3401. It was introduced by the governor, has passed the House, and is awaiting Senate approval. I have read this bill, and you'd think that it was more likely to come from the old Soviet Union than from America's public schools. A couple of its numerous features are these. One, it mandates that the percent of Caucasian teachers has to decrease by at least 2 percentage points every year. It mandates that all other teachers will be eligible for higher compensation than their Caucasian peers until Caucasian teachers have decreased by at least 34% below the current numbers. Additionally, it mandates training programs for teachers and administrators that is anti-racist as defined in the bill. Like all social engineering terms, it sounds great. After all, only a racist would be against something called anti-racist. However, the real-world application is what matters. This is HF 3401's definition of anti-racist. Quote, actively working to identify and eliminate racism in all forms so that power and resources are redistributed, end quote. In other words, once the teachers complete the anti-racist training, they will understand how it is morally correct for the Caucasian teachers to make less money and have less career opportunities than the rest of their coworkers. To think otherwise would mean that you oppose redistribution, and that would make you a racist. And now you know why parents have spent all this time protesting CRT, shouting that it's just racism being taught to children. But school boards treated parents as the enemy. As a result, the groups that champion CRT have come back this year to bend even more of the school system's participants into their vision of the future. However, there is actually a feature in HF 3401 that goes even further. In 2 sections, the bill states that a racially equity-centered school system will lead to gender identity equity as well. It does not mandate any gender identity policies, but is clearly setting up for a future bill where a teacher's gender identity will be used in the same fashion that this bill uses race. And now you understand why parents are horrified by the 3R curriculum. All you are able to see is how children react when 3R cartoon videos are being shown and energized 3R trainers are talking to elementary school kids. But parents see their children's reactions at home when their real thoughts and questions come out. So will this board repeat its mistakes and continue ignoring parents? Or will you defend the children by standing with the parents and in so doing defend every other member of the public school system as well? It's not a secret that policies that have a similar intent have been cropping up in our state, but this bill brings government-mandated hiring and pay discrimination to the public schools, the likes of which have not been seen in this country since 1967. And the anti-racist training is, in a word, inhumane. And our state is in the same group of states as Minnesota that move in lockstep with each other. But what other result could there be? When you cut out history and literature in order to prioritize a social engineering curriculum based on race and gender identity, it's inevitable that you will end up with employment and pay decisions based on your skin color and your gender as well, rather than your goals, your experiences, and your character. We know what the leaders of the National Teachers Union have to say about this, but what is the local union stance on social engineering and this board's responsibility to institute it? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowen. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Good evening. Oh, sorry. Good evening.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm honored that you allow us to come and to be able to explain our views. First off, I would like to talk about the interpreters, American Sign Language. This is essential to expose students to this. I see that students in general, their language delayed. And the reason for this is because there's not enough interpreters. So the deaf population is really struggling. And this is an opportunity for a lot of students, hearing and deaf, to be able to have this. I grew up in a hearing family. My parents tried to sign with me. And then I went to a mainstream program, and I struggled, and it was very frustrating. I was frustrated at home. I was frustrated at school for the lack of communication because communication access was not given. When I would go to school, again, I would get frustrated. And then at home, I would be frustrated. I do not want this for the future generations. Finally, the district school has approved, and I went to a deaf school. And I learned so many things. I just was overwhelmed with the abundance of knowledge. And think about the children growing up now, the value for those deaf students in the future that are language deprived. Now it is 2022, the year 2022. The research is there, the information is there. It has been proven, and I hope you all will look at the facts and see, the value for the students to have this in their lives, to be able to help us in America succeed even better with education, opportunities for these students. A second thing is, I personally am an ASL instructor, and I've gone to different schools and colleges, Hines Community College, Frederick Community College, Blue Ridge. I've been to several for the interpreting program, and they do have ASL classes, which is important for the students to have, and it's a benefit. Many of the students in college fail because Spanish is too hard, German is too hard, and then when they go over to ASL, that is in their means of kinesthetic learning, and they just increase the numbers. And then, wow, the business and everybody is really benefiting from this. So this is an opportunity for interpreters to be provided and also impact to the students and the hearing people to see, wow, maybe I want to become an interpreter. This would be wonderful. ASL is an amazing language. It's beautiful. There's nothing wrong with it. Don't push it aside. It is a language. ASL is a proven language, and it has all the rules and syntax, which is important. Colleges, and now high school. I've gone to several high schools, Loudoun County. I used to go there, and the students truly enjoyed, and they were hungry to learn sign. And so here's an opportunity for the students here. You have the colleges here. Now we need to add the high schools. And it's very popular in Frederick, even in Arlington. There's a variety of cities that have it, and it's amazing. Why don't we have it here in Washington County? Why isn't it offered? We need to raise the education for ASL program as a foreign language and give the exposure to the students. You have the Spanish, you have German, that's fine. But why don't we have the ASL? The numbers would increase, and the businesses would benefit. There's evidence proven that this is true. So the students are passing, world countries are now passing this, and then they don't need it when they go to college because they've already taken it, which is nice for students to be able to benefit this way. Thank you for your time. Please think about ASL. Don't think of it as an ugly language or animals use it. This is humans working in a beautiful language. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Does it matter which chair?
No, doesn't matter.
Okay. Hello, everybody.
Good evening.
I would like to make some brief comments. I moved in the year 2006 from Frederick, which is a huge deaf community. I was so excited to learn that this area is growing, the deaf community is growing here, so I moved, bought a house here. I do work in Frederick at Maryland School for the Deaf. I'm a teacher there, and I work with the deaf students. I moved here. In the beginning, you know, there would be doctors in Frederick. Any medical emergency, urgent care, I would have to go to Frederick for everything. But I plan to move here to Hagerstown. And it's more 15 plus years later, and there's still not enough interpreters. It is a scarcity. You know, maybe they took 1 or 2 ASL classes in college, and then they tried to interpret, and it does not work. They need, 15 years later, I am still going to Frederick to try and get this information that I need and the services that I need. My daughter is hearing. She's a child of a deaf adult. My daughter goes to a private school where they provide ASL classes. And I would love for my daughter to have that experience to take ASL classes here in Washington County, but it's not offered. So I feel like there's a discourse with my family. We are deaf people. We are culturally deaf. We're not just, deaf auditorily, but we're culturally deaf as well. We use ASL to communicate. And we do everything that you all do except here. And my daughter, she's like, oh, the value of sign is not here. I'm like, whoa, 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 all over the world. Like the person before said, you know, it's a fast-growing field. It'd be nice if we could start this in middle school or elementary school. Maybe a little bit of teaching in elementary. Middle school, they could provide classes. And then high school, go from there. And that would lead into college. So we need not 2 or 3 classes. We need like years and years of experience with ASL before we're able to get a good job. So I think it's a good investment for Washington County to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Hello, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Jackie, and I'm mother of 3 children, and one of them is deaf. They don't go to school here. But I wanted to share that it would be a great opportunity if you provide this for the deaf culture, deaf studies, and maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 classes, and lead to become a better deaf community provider here. And more likely, they would be more deaf-friendly in the community, and it would open up and have a partnership between the deaf and the hearing people. And I'm hoping that would happen sooner than later. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Kirkpatrick, and I'm mother of 3 children as well, who all can hear. They asked me many, many times, why doesn't the school have ASL classes? I would like to learn more. One of them aspires to be an interpreter, and there are many counties here that offer it except Washington County. And also, as one of the other people said, is investment in the future businesses, not just for the deaf community, but for the hearing community as well. And the two can merge and become a partnership between the two of them. The medical field, the educational field, colleges, elementary through college. And so I'm hoping you all will consider this and accept ASL as a program that you offer. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Good evening.
Hello, my name is Angelica. And I just wanted to share a little bit. I was trying to find a church where they had ASL interpreters, and it was hard to find. My son and I were very frustrated. We're both deaf. And we did find one church that had an interpreter, and somehow now the congregation is learning how to sign. And so my son is so much more enthusiastic about going to church. And I think if you did the same thing in the schools, the hearing peers would also be a lot more interested in learning to sign. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. At this time, we'll have board member response to public comment. Yes.
I have a question for Dr. Michael. Wasn't there a time, maybe my memory is foggy on this,
Oh,
too.
there is one more than myself.
Oh.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Good
Hi.
evening. Hi.
I'm a student here in Washington County, and I would like to encourage you to please consider this, because my friends who are hearing are trying to learn to sign with me. And it really would be nice if we can communicate a lot more easily. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wasn't there a time or an attempt to offer this at one time in Washington County at one of the schools? I have a vague memory of this. I can't put a time frame on it or where it was or.
Yeah, I might have to defer to Dr. Willow or to Dr. Wilcox. I know a number of years ago, we asked about American Sign Language being a foreign language or being offered for foreign language credit. I know the answer at that time was no, but this is back a ways, so I don't know what the answer is right now. To offer it as for credit certainly would be a possibility. At least 2 of my children learned it at school. I don't know if it was a club or how they learned it, but I'm kind of having that same thought process. There was something that happened, but not as a class, but they learned it through a club or something, it seemed like.
I can't remember.
So Dr. Will, I don't know what the current, whether you can earn 2 credits in American Sign
You
Language
can.
and count
It's,
as your foreign
you-
language?
You can create courses where you could earn 2, up to 4 potentially, and it is now accepted as the University of Maryland as part of the graduation requirements. We have students that are currently taking it through Hagerstown Community College as articulation classes or essence classes, as you might be referring to. Mr. Stauffer, at one time, Williamsport High School, years back, had looked at it, but I don't think there was enough interest. However, with Blueprint, this is something that we can look at as we move into next year as a great possibility, and again, just to explore it a little bit more.
Thank you, Dr. Mrs. Murray.
I just want to say thank you to all the speakers, but especially for our deaf people in the audience that brought to our attention about American Sign Language, because I think it's very important. I didn't know that it could be offered as a world language. Now we know, and now we can do something about it. So thank you very much for speaking tonight. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Yes, thank you to all those who spoke this evening. You've certainly created awareness, and I'm one who's interested in exploring the possibilities. So thank you for coming out and making us aware. Tanesh?
Yes, I just wanted to also add, of course, thanks for all the speakers, and especially the deaf community for coming out. But from the student perspective, there's actually quite a lot of students who've said they are interested in learning. So a lot of my friends have said, in fact, I think 3 or 4 of them even learned by themselves. I think just as a group, they learn over the course of a few months. And I feel like if we gauge in the students again, if there was interest, it definitely could be offered, because I have heard from my friends that they do want to learn.
I would like to just add as well, I know one of the speakers did speak about the kinesthetic part of it. I taught in Anne Arundel County where they do offer it. You could get all 4 of your world language credits in ASL, and especially for the requirement for some of the graduation tracks there, it was excellent for kids who just struggle to sit still in class. I know there was a lot of success. I was good friends with one of the teachers at Meade High School where I did teach, and there was a lot of success. I would hope this is something that we'd be able to move forward with. I think it would, not only for the deaf community, but for other kids who, need that. I think it'd be very helpful for them. So I'd hope we can move forward with that.
Mr. Victor?
I thought it was a great idea as well. It's certainly, just like many of the other world languages, it offers a lot of the same skills. So I think it's a fantastic idea. And I also wanted to thank our representative from Antietam Academy for coming. You do amazing work there. We're so grateful for it. And so I appreciate you coming and advocating for the school.
I just want to say, I've watched Mrs. Meese back here for years to do this. Her son played soccer and was a student of mine. Cindy, you want to stand up since I'm talking about you? I watched her for years. I was always amazed the way she did that.
Thank you again to all who spoke this evening during public comment. We'll begin with reports to the board, and then we'll have additional reports following personnel action this evening. Our first report is the legislative briefing on the 2022 Maryland legislative session. We have with us this evening Mrs. Ardith Cade, who is the board's legislative representative, along with Mrs. Erspra, from our legal department.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm not meaning to terrify you by bringing this big pile of papers. But I just, this is my security blanket. These are some of the pieces of legislation, should you ask me a very hard question. In the end of the session, I did write to you. I stopped by to see our delegation. Your delegation will be changing some, with two of them definitely not running. And it is an end of an era. Several of the committee chairmen have retired. A number of other legislators are retiring. We just learned this week that Bob Gorel of the IAC is leaving. So it is there'll be a new governor. It is going to be a very different legislature and political scene come next year. What it's going to be, we don't know, do we? Again, there were many, many bills that were put in, but really less bills passed this year than usual, which on the whole is a good thing. I sent you a case study just so you could kind of see in the packet, I guess you received over the weekend, the case study of the seizure bill. And if you just looked at how many different steps there were, how many different amendments were proposed, amendments proposed on one side, adopted or not adopted, then whether the opposite house accepted them or not, and you have more than 2 pages of the steps that it took to get that bill. And if you look at the bill as it passed, there's some that's in small type, that's existing legislation, some that's crossed out, some that's in big type that was new language, some of the new language is crossed out, some of the new additional new language is put in. So you can see that the process of getting something from introduction to passage is often very bumpy. It is the sausage making they talk about. But on the whole, things this year came out pretty well. And there's not a lot. I don't think there's anything that we are really pushing the governor to, or asking the governor to veto in the education field. And that's good too. And of course, with plenty of money, there was an easier time doing budget things. Just very quickly, some of the things that we've talked about that didn't pass, some of it which I thought would pass, financial literacy, 4th year of introduction, still not a required credit course. Crimes on the school grounds, the bill that we discussed considerably, that seems to be kind of a backwards bill that was explained so well a couple meetings ago, that did not pass. The video recording in the self-contained special ed classrooms did not pass. Carbon monoxide monitoring, updating that, did not pass. The anaphylactic food allergies bill didn't pass. And the broncholator use and policy bill, which was really very complicated and had some pretty questionable elements, did not pass. Those, it was fine that they didn't pass. The one that we wanted to pass that didn't is the one that allowed $100,000 small systemic renovation projects to be eligible for built-to-learn money. And apparently the chairman of appropriations didn't like that bill and sat on that bill and felt that the money should be used for big projects, and the bill had gone sailing through the Senate and it sat in the House and died. You were given, I believe today, this excellent MABE summary. And so instead of my jumping around, I'm going to go, but not in detail, very quickly through that. The operating budget, there's full funding for the blueprint mandates, and there's reserves of $800 million set up for next year. And overall education funding was a 6.6% increase. Then there was a bill in that was some corrective measures for Blueprint, and then there was another one about MOE, and they merged them. And that bill, it sets a new date for when the local governments have to have their implementation plan in because the AIB wasn't able to do their plan in time when that meant MSDE wouldn't be able to do their plan, their guidance in time, which meant that you wouldn't be able to do your plans in time. So now you have until March of next year. They worked on the MOE issue and made it clear that the higher of two possible MOE payments was what each county government would be required, and they actually put that into those figures right into the bill. So the 106 million, I believe it is, for Washington County is in that bill as the MOE requirement. Not meaning that the county commissioners couldn't give you a lot more if they wished to. That's the bare minimum. And then there's the whole issue about the how to count for comp ed, and that issue didn't really get resolved, but MSDE has to clarify that for next year. So that bill was put together and worked through, and there were funny errors in it, but people got together and worked over weekends and got it straightened out so that it looks like it's pretty healthy. The capital budget, if you look at the figures, they add up to over $1 billion available for school construction. A lot of that is the Built to Learn. And some of it now is in a loan program that people can use to get started on projects that they don't have all of their appropriation for. On the next page, the public school construction funding and administration, there's been some studies and all going on, and this bill, really, I'm not going to go into any detail in it. It's your facilities management people, I'm sure, are studying it carefully, but it does help if you are building doing a project for a concentration of poverty school that's over 80%. At that level, you get 10% increase in the percentage the state will pay for toward the cost of that. And if your building is for 55 to 80% poverty, then you get 5%. And then there's an assessment. If your assessment is good or superior, and you're doing some things, you get 5% increase. So it's helping the facilities get built that they feel need to get built. And but again, it's a complicated bill, but it is one that I think that you may be able to take some advantage of over the next couple of years. The climate bill is a big, fat bill, but the school portions of that require that there be zero emission vehicles being purchased in the future, and there's also a side bill that is a pilot program for total electric vehicles. But that would be for investor-owned electric companies to pay for that pilot. They want you to create net zero school grant fund. They created that fund to help as moving toward net zero energy use schools. And then you will have to consider in each school building that you're building whether you could use solar panels. You're not required to. You have to say why you can't, why you shouldn't if you decide that you shouldn't, and why it isn't a viable thing. So there's a whole lot in that climate bill. Again, in the facilities management people always get a lot of work out of a new legislative package, and they'll have to be digging into all of these things. The bill on restraint and seclusion, it's a topic that's been worked on and worked on and worked on, And now seclusion is almost eliminated from the options, and even there are very strict standards for restraint. This always is a complicated and sensitive subject, of course, and one that has lots of pros and cons. There is to be more data collection so that the state can really see what's happening and can make judgment as to whether there are any additional changes that need to be made in the future. I've been very interested in the discussion of hearing tonight, but the bill that did pass has the equivalent access in all digital tools, and it is meant for the particularly for the visually impaired. It requires that digital tools developed or purchased by a county board shall include specifications for access for students with disabilities, including non-visual access. And apparently most of the companies that you do purchase programs from already are moving in this direction or know that this is something that they must do. But you're going to be required to do this for all digital tools that you are developing. And apparently it means even for one that a teacher is developing on his or her own. So that one is, as all of these, they all have complications and demands that you haven't had before. And again, often they have costs related to them. There's a new council that is going to develop best practices for student data privacy protection. We didn't really discuss that much, but that went through with relative ease, I believe. We have talked considerably about the mental health absences, and that will be an allowed absence, limited absence. And each school system really gets to define what that is, but there won't need to be a physician's note for a limited mental health absence. But when a student comes back from a mental health absence, you'll be required to give them information about mental health services and so forth that are available to them. So that's a new nuance, and your attendance people, I'm sure, are going to be interested in how you flesh that out and how you define those absences. Our favorite bill, the reportable offenses bill. Again, I could show you how it went through gyrations to the very last moment, and by the very last moment, it was a bill that isn't really, it didn't change really what reportable offenses are. It does give a little more protection to a student. They may bring an attorney with them when they come to talk to the principal, and the principal isn't to ask about the reportable offense itself. But they did take out at the very last minute the requirement that a student be allowed to go back to their home school, because a lot of them are never removed from their home school. Most of them, particularly in your case, almost none of them are removed from their home school. Any that are, may be, for a short period, or they may go into the juvenile justice system and be gone for 3 years. So having in the law that they'll go back to their home school really wasn't making sense, and particularly in cases if it was a sexual offense and that sort of thing, where they already by law aren't allowed to be in the same system, in the same place. So that one turned out okay. It started out horribly, but a lot of work went into getting rid of the bad stuff in the bill. And, but it was interesting. It was the kind of bill that you'd listen, you'd watch the hearings and or committee discussions, and I would find that, oh, she's saying something that I know isn't quite right, and you'd want to be there, and you'd want to be shaking your fist and saying, no. And you could send emails to your legislators that were on the committee and say, this provision is, shouldn't be there, and so it could get you very involved, as all of these bills can. But it's an interesting process, and again, you have to either be in it or outside it. You can't sort of be halfway into the legislative process, and you're either swimming in it or you're watching kind of from the outside. So I guess I've been swimming in it for a lot of years, and now I'm going to be pulling back. The seizure action plans, I've given you the bill. Again, it does require that 2 persons in each school be trained in seizure disorders, one of them being the nurse, and that there'll be training every couple of years so that people are more aware. But at first, it had started out that more and more people were going to be actually medicating kids, and apparently that's a complicated decision to make about how and what to medicate a seizure kid, how to do that and with what medication. And also a good provision in this bill is that the parents of a child who has seizures is required to help work with the school on the needs of their child, the likelihood, the medications they should be provided, and so forth. So that bill turned out to be okay. The family medical leave bill is not just for schools, it's for everybody. And there's a lot about that bill that hasn't really been worked out, but it will eventually provide apparently up to 12 weeks of family medical leave. But there will be a contributory system, just like there is sort of with workman's comp, where both the employer and the employee will be putting some money into the bank so that these people can be paid, and it won't be all a burden on their immediate employer. So I would say it's a step, but there's a long way to go before that program is implemented and it's clear how it's going to work. But that's one that people have been working on for a long time. Kind of an interesting little bill. Provides a $500 bonus for each non-certified education support professional in Maryland. And that is defined those are any non-certified public school employees designated as part of a bargaining unit under state law. So you know which employees that is. At one point, it was looked at as very narrow, but I think it's broadened to include, and I don't want to speak this as fact, but bus drivers and cafeteria workers and those. So that's just because some other employees got bonuses, and this is just a small sort of a thank you for people having lived through COVID, I think. The virtual schools bill, there was one in the House, one in the Senate. They were very different, and there was a lot of complexity about them. And I didn't get into all the nuances on the virtual schools, but the outcomes are that there can only be one virtual school, one grade of each of virtual school per school in a school district, unless you get a waiver from the state, and that pre-K and kindergarten cannot be virtual, and that nonprofit entities cannot be providing the virtual schools. I mean, excuse me, for-profit entities cannot be providing the virtual schools. And there's a virtual school on the Eastern Shore that I think like 5 or 6 counties are involved in, and it is run by a for-profit organization. And so I think they've given them 2-year hiatus, but the feeling that the state does not want the private people to be coming in to provide the virtual schools, and that we want it to be our teachers and our administrations and so forth. Cybersecurity was a big issue. There are 3 bills that were passed. One of them is like 47 pages long, another is like 28, and the third one, I'm not even sure how long it is. I have not really read these bills. I've scanned them a little, but, and looking at the report from this, it's going to require local government entities to complete cybersecurity preparedness assessments and make specified reports. And there is a Maryland Cyber Defense Initiative, and there's going to be a lot of learning, training. There was a provision in that students would be allowed to take courses in cybersecurity as well. I'm not sure if that ended up in any of those 3 bills or not, but I don't think there's anything to prevent it either. Because there, as we know, the Baltimore County Board of Education got hit with cybersecurity. I mean, got security, and they really haven't said how it got in. They haven't said what it's cost them to get out, and so it's a real issue that we're all having to learn more about, whether we want to or not, because it's a critical matter, and it can really close things down, and so we need to be taking precautions. The emergency plan for student athletes is one that's going to cost you some money and be a little complicated. It's requiring that there be heat acclimatization, is that how I say that? At all athletic events and practices. And this is like cold temperature, ice, I don't know. I mean, all the different ways that you can have for cooling and assuring that kids are not becoming overheated. And also that at each of these events, there has to be an external defibrillator. And then there have to be plans and training for everybody involved. But it's also not just about those 2 things, but about how to deal with spine injuries, concussions, orthopedic injuries, etc. So your athletic people are going to have some new training, and you're going to have to make some new expenditures to accommodate this bill. One that I didn't see much about, heard much about during the session. And again, it makes sense. It's a good bill in terms of what it does. But even good bills always have the side effect, usually, of costing money and taking time and so forth. So, and finally, the bill that allows a student to modify their athletic uniform to be more modest did pass. So that is available if students wish to modify for modesty. that's kind of the session. It was an interesting one, not as contentious as usual, because there was so much money available through the COVID money that's become available, that there wasn't a struggle over the budget. And again, it's an election year, so people maybe were on their good behavior, I'm not sure. But that doesn't mean there was not heavy discussion on many, many bills and a lot of difference of opinion. So it ended with a flurry. I was not down there at midnight. But I was on my computer, and they passed bills at about 1 a minute or faster in the last hour that the session was going. So a lot of bills did not pass until that very last few hours of the session, and that's pretty typical. It doesn't make sense, but it's typical. It's what happens, and it's, people hold it, and, and then they get convinced, okay, let's let this one go. But then there are all these conference committees where the House and the Senate versions are different, and they have a committee of 3 from each, and they go and they go out in, the public is allowed to be where they are, the press or anybody, and they negotiate the differences, and they'll either decide they can't concur, or they divide and split the difference, or, it can be any kind of a conclusion. So that was all going on. And I want to thank you all for letting me do this work for you for these many years. And I've enjoyed being part of Washington County. As I've told you before, I'm proud of this county and its school system. And there are many things that you do better than most other counties, I think. And so I hold my head up high when I say that I am doing this work for you. And I really want to thank all of you, particularly, oh, wow. Ooh. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. The quick response team has been, we get to know each other. We have lots of doings together. The rest of you I haven't got to know quite as well. The law office, Tony, and now Patty. Well, I use your last name, I'm sorry. And especially Jamie Brown. Jamie and I have been in constant contact for these many years, and she is an amazing, very thorough, very perceptive staff person that you can be very proud of. And so, again, I will miss doing this. I won't miss driving up in the rain or things like that, but it's been a real honor and pleasure for me to work with you. Thank you very much, and these are gorgeous.
Thank you, Arvin.
Well, Mrs. Cade, thank you for your years of service. It's going on 10 years for me, and you've been here every minute of that. And I know in years to come, in Washington County, we'll be talking about the legend that is Ardith Cade. So we thank you for being our eyes and our ears and our voice in Annapolis, because you've done a fabulous job for us, and we're very appreciative of that. So, colleagues, Mr. Stafford?
I just want to say, she's going to be hard to replace, because she not only has the knowledge and the experience down there, but one of the things that I've noticed in my 5 years working with her, when she goes to talk to the legislators, she has their respect. She has their respect. They give her straight answers. They don't give her things, They know what she's going to do. She's part of a group of people called the Green Streeters, because that's where they met at one time.
Yeah.
But they're a group of professionals who have weekly meetings or something and discuss these bills, and she's going to be tough to replace. We'll find maybe someone as knowledgeable, but I don't know if we'll find someone who is as well respected in Annapolis as what you are, and I've seen that personally.
Thank you.
Yes.
I greatly appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you again.
And I'm going to let you carry those.
Thank you, Mrs. Earnsberg.
Because I don't want to spill them.
Beautiful flowers.
They are.
Beautiful flowers.
Good job.
Okay, at this time, we'll begin old business. We have one item of old business, and that is the second reading of proposed changes to policy JEA, pregnant and parenting students attendance policy. We have Mrs. Ram, our chief legal counsel, and the liaison to our policy committee with us this evening.
Good evening. President Williams, members of the board, Dr. Michael. The Board of Education agreed with the Policy Committee's recommendation on April 5th, 2022 to approve the first reading of proposed changes to Policy JEA. Immediately following the Board of Education's approval of the first reading, the committee posted a notice on board docs and the school system's website seeking comments from the public on the proposed changes. The committee did not receive any comments from the public. The committee is now recommending that the Board of Education approve the second reading of proposed changes to Policy JEA.
Thank you, Mrs. Ram. Is there a motion?
To approve the second reading of proposed changes to policy JEA entitled Pregnant and Parenting Students Attendance Policy.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Any discussion or any questions?
And most of the changes were stemming from state required changes.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the second reading of proposed changes to policy JEA entitled Pregnant and Parenting Students Attendance Policy? All right, we have a unanimous vote and the student member concurs. So we have an approved second reading. Thank you, Mrs. Ram. We'll move to new business. Our first item is the consideration of a contract agreement between the Washington County Board of Education and the Washington County Educational Support Personnel, Inc. for the 2022-2023 school year. Good evening.
We ask for your consideration and approval of a contract agreement between the Washington County Board of Education and the Washington County Educational Support Personnel for the 2022-2023 school year.
Thank you, Mrs. Baker. Is there a motion?
President Williams, I move to approve the contract agreement between the Washington County Board of Education and the Washington County Educational Support Personnel for the 2022-2023 school year.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Questions? Questions? Comments? We'll move to the vote. All those in favor of approval of a contract agreement between the Washington County Board of Education and the Washington County Educational Support Personnel, the 2022-2023 school year, fiscal year 23. All those in favor? All right, we have a unanimous vote. Student member concurs.
I want to thank our team for the work that they did and the ESP team for their cooperation. I think this year, kind of behind the scenes, had the opportunity to kind of follow what was happening. The language that both teams kind of come up with and presented to the board for their approval, I think was mutually beneficial to ESP staff as well as to the Board of Education. And then the salary package we were able to pull together, you were able to pull together and agree upon. I think every combination of numbers were put together over the last 3 or 4 months that Eric Sisler could come up with, kind of our number cruncher behind the scenes. And I'm very, very pleased with the outcome, not only for staff, but hopefully as a recruitment tool moving forward. And I just appreciate all the cooperation from the ESP team and all the work from the WCPS team here to get the job done. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to both teams.
I would also like to thank the WCESP negotiating team, particularly Jimmy Bowers and Patty Felix, Kathy Lair, and our Uniserv Ryan Genovese. This was a very complicated but collaborative process, and I appreciate the board's bargaining team and the effort that they put in, and hopefully this will be the beginning of many more good years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, our next item of new business is the approval of this evening's consent agenda. We have Mr. Bakewell, our supervisor of purchasing, with us this evening. Good evening, Mr. Bakewell.
Good evening, President Williams, members of the board, Dr. Michael. Tonight, I have 7 items for your review. These items have been reviewed by our Purchasing Review Committee and are being recommended for approval, and staff is available if you have any additional questions.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the awards and renewals for tools and equipment for Washington County Technical High School to Snap-on Industrial and Paxton Patterson LLC at the unit prices listed. Bleacher replacement at South Hagerstown High School to TJ Distributors, Inc. at a cost of $167,000. Emergency generator at Funkstown Elementary School to Milton Stamper Builders at a cost of $494,000. Tenable IO vulnerability management software renewal to CDWG at a cost of $92,000. Data warehousing software maintenance and support services renewal to Power School Group LLC at a cost of $65,545.20. Technology education supplies and equipment to Amtech Company, Inc. at a cost of $86,000. And grounds maintenance equipment and utility vehicles to EB's Lawn and Garden at a cost of $31,996. And Antietam Tractor and Equipment, Inc. at a cost of $41,117.95.
Is there a second? Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Any questions for Mr. Bakewell? Any discussion?
I have a question.
Mr. Stouffer?
The bleachers at South High, these are in the gymnasium.
Correct, yes.
So these aren't the old wooden bleachers that have been in there for,
When I was there for the pre-bid, they were wooden bleachers. I don't know if they're...
I can't remember if they were replaced when they did the modernization or not, probably.
probably were replaced, I was going to say.
Dr. Wilcox is saying no.
Mr. Rollins will have the answer to that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I have the whole answer, but I agree with Dr. Michael. I'm not sure. I don't think they were replaced at the last renovation because they don't have handicap accessibility features and things like that. So I think they predate that renovation. I don't think they're original to the school though. What I do know is the school's been having a lot of trouble with them, just pulling them in and out. They're manual. They have a tractor they got to use to pull it out, and they're jamming up and stuff. So they're just, maintenance has listed them as something that needs to be replaced for quite a few years, so we're able to get to them here with
I
some
just
aging
wondered
school
because
money.
if they're the old wooden bleachers I used to sit on, they're old.
Yep.
I'll guarantee you.
No kidding. I would just like to add that I appreciate, especially for the lawn equipment you put in there, the amount of hours and how long everything was used. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to give us the detail and let us know why we need to spend the money on this. Thank you.
I have one more question.
Go for it.
On the generator, I think it was at Funkstown, the Davis-Bacon wage rates, they're prevailing wages, I assume?
They're the federal prevailing wages.
Yeah, so that
right.
increases the cost of the project.
That would be my assumption. We'd have to bid it both ways to make that determination.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Any further discussion? No? Then we'll move to the vote. We're voting on the approval of tonight's consent agenda as read by Mr. Bickford in his motion and seconded the motion by Mrs. Murray. All those in favor of approval? All right, we have a unanimous vote. The student member concurs, so we have an approved consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
begin with the superintendent's report. Dr. Michael.
Ms. Williams, to begin with, we're going to have some recognition of Administrative Professionals Day. Next Wednesday, April 27th, we recognize the people who really run our school system, run our schools, run our offices here at CES. And I'd like to ask Dr. Pugh if she would just recognize those individuals collectively.
Thank you. On April 27th this year, we celebrate National Administrative Professionals Day. This holiday is always celebrated on the Wednesday of the last full week of April. The day recognizes the important work of secretaries, administrative assistants, receptionists, and all administrative support professionals. National Administrative Professionals Day, also known as Secretary's Day or Admin Day, recognizes the professionals who keep the schools and offices running smoothly every day. They're central to the efficient and effective functioning of the school system. These professionals keep us organized and efficient, and they're often the first people you see when you walk in the building. The day in the life of an administrative professional varies from moment to moment. While organization is key to their success, their flexibility and ability to handle the unexpected is what makes them extremely invaluable to Washington County Public Schools. And today, we'd like to say thank you to all of our administrative professionals.
Thank you to all our administrative professionals. Thank you, Cheryl, for the work you do with me. Yes, absolutely. Okay, as we've been doing here for a number of weeks, Dr. Willard is going to bring you a brief update on some timelines with the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. The one thing that I've recognized over the last 3 or 4 years is they've been rolling out the blueprint is nothing is for certain. So Dr. Willard is going to give you a very broad view of this, subject to change.
That is an excellent way to introduce this, subject to change. Good evening, President Williams, members of the board, Dr. Michael. I'm here to talk a little bit about the blueprint and the timeline for the next 3 years. Probably the biggest thing that we're going to start with is the actual Accountability and Implementation Board. One of the requirements in Blueprint is that we submit a blueprint plan. Originally, by law, this was going to be due for approval by June 15th of 2022. However, due to the delay in implementation of the AIB, there was a new timeline that passed through the General Assembly this year. So now the plan is under development with the AIB. Between now and October, we will get to see a template of the plan. While the AIB creates the plan, it is actually MSDE that submits the criteria for approval. So this is a joint effort between the AIB and MSDE. We anticipate that our plan will be due in March of 2023 now. So it has been pushed back just a little bit. When we look at what's coming for next year, we've talked about a number of these things already. For example, the private providers account for pre-K slots. An example of that is in our budget this year, you approved pass-through funds to our private daycare providers that are already participating in pre-K. MSDE is continuing to develop new curriculum frameworks for math and ELA. One of the changes in the teacher practicum is that beginning July 1st, it is now 100 days of student teaching as opposed to a semester. By 2025, that actually goes up to a full year of student teaching. We've discussed the NBC salary increases. The ninth grade tracker is something that we are in the works of beginning to develop. I would say we have all of the data for that, but it's really looking at ninth grade students and who is on track to be successful and working with ninth grade students early in the school year when they start to fall behind. These are things that we've been doing with our SST team and again, tracking this data through our assessment platform. We've talked last time about the developing of CCR pathways, and starting next year, the MSDE expert review teams will become visiting our schools. We anticipate 5 to 6 schools starting next year and that number increasing each year. As we go out into 23-24, the private providers that are helping us with pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds will expand. In 23-24, the post-CCR pathways that I just talked about will begin. The career ladder is something that is continued to be negotiated during the 23-24 school year, and that there is a $62 per student for career counseling that we work with the Workforce Development Board. And that is specifically for CTE pathways apprenticeship programs. And then the last slide that I have is 24-25. Again, you can see that the eligible private providers account continues to increase. The career ladder does begin on July 1st, 2024, and that is also the year that all teachers had received a 10% salary increase between July of 2019 and June 30th of 2024. There's also a new professional development system that MSDE will put out that coincides with the career ladder. Really, going beyond 3 years right now would probably be not very smart, just because of the amount of changes that continue to happen with Blueprint and with the AIB now working to become fully staffed and just starting. So that's where we'll stop for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Willow. We met at BZAM just a week or so ago. We did meet with Rachel Heiss and Brett Kerwin, and while they're very, very smart people, the superintendents had more questions than they had answers at this time. So more to come on the Blueprint, I'm sure. Our next presentation, just wanted to bring the board up to speed a little bit on high school schedule for next year. As a result of our 100-day committee, there was a recommendation that we try to get our high schools more consistent on the same schedule. Dr. Wilcox has been leading that effort, and is just going to bring us a brief update regarding where we are with plans for next year. Dr. Wilcox.
Good evening, President Williams, Vice President Stauffer, Dr. Michael, and board members. This evening, I am providing you with an update concerning our adjustments to the high school schedule for the 2022-2023 school year. Our vision is that all students meet college and career readiness standards by the end of 10th grade and graduate on time with a post-secondary plan. Currently, all comprehensive high schools operate on a 6 or 7 period day, and class length in those schools varies between 49 minutes to 90 minutes per class period. Last spring, the 100-day committee recommended that all comprehensive high schools operate on the same schedule. This would be all high schools with the exception of Washington County Technical High School and Barbara Ingram School for the Arts, which would maintain their current schedule. And they also recommended a schedule that allows flexibility to meet the individual needs of students. And their recommendation was that periods 1 through 4 would be 45 minutes in length, and that periods 5 and 6 would be 90 minutes in length. When we worked with principals and our content supervisors, we had 4 goals. The first goal was providing consistent educational opportunities. Second goal was to create consistent and customized delivery models. Third was to provide additional planning time for our teachers. And the fourth was to use our existing staffing to achieve our new schedule. For the 2022-2023 school year, we're going to look at an 8-period day where periods can be grouped together to form a longer period for either semester courses or year-long extended classes with built-in intervention. We took the model from the 100-day, and to provide flexibility, we decided to unblock periods 5 and 6 as 90 minutes and to allow schools to move that period around as to where the block fits best in their individual schools. We also created, with principals and content supervisors, minimum course requirements for course consistency across the district. So for example, all AP classes will be year-long. There cannot be a semesterized AP class. Algebra 1 for next year will be 2 periods long, so 2 45-minute blocks for a total of 90 minutes of Algebra 1 every day. 9th and 10th grade assessed courses will be year-long, and then there are possible semester courses for honors students, honors courses, and then all 11th and 12th grade courses can be semesterized or year-long, depending on the individual needs of the school. This schedule allows for flexibility for implementing Blueprint requirements in the future, as Dr. Willow discussed with CCR and so forth. And it also allows for flexible scheduling for student needs. It allows for additional time for specific courses that students may need. It allows for built-in opportunities for supplemental instruction, and it allows for additional opportunities for elective courses. For example, students can become dual completers, or they can take additional courses in the fine arts. This slide is a sample schedule of a 9th grade student and of a 12th grade student. And you can see that for the 9th grade student, Algebra 1 is 2 periods long. That's blocks 1 and 2. English 9 for this particular student would be year-long. Then you have IPC and U.S. Studies as year-long courses. And then this particular model has Spanish 1 as a semester course 2 periods long, and then Spanish 2 second semester, and then a PE first semester and an Art 1. In the senior schedule, you can see that the English is first semester and it is double blocked. Then you have Intro to Stats for the 4th math credit, which is a semester course, followed by Honors Psychology, and then the rest of the day for the first semester and the spring semester could be used for a CTE apprenticeship, it could be used for HCC, dual credit opportunities, and a multitude of other things that will exist under Blueprint for our students to be able to work towards as we develop our CCR pathways. Again, these are just 2 samples with the flexibility of the minimums that schools can create. Student schedules will look different for each student based on their individual needs. In addition, the third goal that we had was to provide additional planning time, and so we are looking for teachers to teach 6 of the 8 periods, which will leave them 2 periods in the high school schedule for planning purposes. One of those planning periods will be for individual planning time, and we will guarantee a minimum of 250 minutes per the contract of individual planning time, and the additional time will be used for collaborative planning, tutoring students, and also for professional development opportunities that will be built in for teachers during the school day.
Thank you, Dr. Wilcox. And probably the last thing that I have for this evening is just really an announcement. Tomorrow night is our Teacher of the Year event, co-sponsored by the Chamber. So out of Fountainhead. Looking forward to recognizing all of our nominees. We had about 100 nominees, I believe. We have 5 finalists. We've already shared those names, and we're excited for all 5 of them and wish them all the very best of luck. And tomorrow night, I will know who the winner is. I never know until I open that envelope. So I'll be as excited as the individuals in anticipation for that. So again, we wish all 5 of them good luck tomorrow night, and look forward to seeing who our Teacher of the Year will be for the upcoming school year. With that, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. We'll move to personnel action. We have Dr. Pugh here.
Good evening, President Williams, members of the board. As discussed earlier in closed session, there are a number of staff changes for your review. And at this time, I ask for your approval of personnel actions.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
President Williams, I move to approve the personnel actions dated Tuesday, April 19th, 2022, as presented in closed session.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Zedmeyer. Are there any questions? Okay, then we'll move to the vote. We're voting on approval of the personnel actions dated today as presented earlier in closed session. All those in favor of those changes, actions? Okay, we have an affirmative of 7. Thank you, Dr. Pugh. We have those personnel actions approved. All right, move to reports to the board. Dr. Zentmeyer, would you like to begin with curriculum and instruction, please?
C&I will meet here May 16th at 1:30, and if you get an opportunity, check out some of the books in the lobby, especially the physics book, which is absolutely superb. AP Physics.
Thank you. Finance, Mr. Evans?
Nothing to report at this time.
Facilities, Mr. Gessert?
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Human Resources, Mrs. Murray?
Yes, Human Resources met on Tuesday, April 12th in the Hagerstown room, and we learned about a company nurse program. We learned about, we had a recruitment update, and we had a brief review of Frontline, which is really a great program. It's absence management, professional growth, recruiting and hiring, and Frontline Central. And then we're going to learn about a Teach state certification system next time we meet, which will be in July.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Mr. Victor, Policy Review and Development.
Policy met on April 12th. We discussed school-sponsored trips, as well as the policy that was passed in second read tonight on pregnant and parenting students' attendance. We're currently reviewing proposed changes to our ethics policies, including the financial disclosure forms that we all have to submit. And our next meeting is May 4th, Wednesday, May 4th at 2 o'clock.
Thank you. Mr. Government?
Yes, Washington County Association of Student Councils will be hosting its final General Assembly for this year this Thursday at South High, where there will be the SMOB and the Board of Student Leader elections.
And Dr. Zetmeyer, do you have anything for the ad hoc committee on superintendent compensation? Would you like to report? I know we have.
We've completed our assignment.
Oh, great, thank you. And I do believe that the report was submitted and members have that as part of their packet. Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer. Okay, on to future agenda items. You have a list of future agenda items. Coming up this Saturday, April 23rd, we have a board retreat and a special closed session. On May 3rd, we have a legislative briefing. Can that be correct? We just have our last briefing?
Probably just carried it forward. I think we just had our last one.
All righty, so that gets marked down. We have several recognitions coming up on May 3rd, and another report on the blueprint.
We're going to back that one up a couple weeks to maybe the first meeting in June. Next
Okay, the blueprint?
report. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And we have in June then, we'll be looking at the educational facilities master plan and approving that at our second meeting in June. So that's what we have on upcoming agendas. If you have suggestions for future agendas, please let a member of the Agenda Planning Committee know, and we'll get that placed on an agenda. So that brings us to board member comments. Mr. Gupta, would you like to begin down there? Thank you. Mrs. Murray?
I have nothing.
Thank you. Mr. Bigford?
Trend going, I have nothing.
Mr. Stauffer?
Nothing for me.
Mr. Gesford?
Nothing.
Nothing. Mr. Evans?
I'm just happy to see everyone here with no snow on the ground.
Thank you. Dr. Zentmeyer?
Well, I was going to start with the most expensive Easter egg given to his wife by Tsar Alexander III, but then it snowed. And it doesn't get much better than a couple of inches of snow, grandchildren, a bowl of popcorn, and a good movie, especially one with the message. Anna tells us in Frozen 2, just do the next right thing. Whether you're searching for a superintendent to fill enormously big shoes, teaching a seemingly distracted student, sitting in a class that doesn't really play to your strengths, parenting a confused teen, passing a homeless person on the highway, or, as I may have been tempted to spew out some angry words, just do the next right thing.
Thank you, Dr. Zentmeyer, and we'll let you have the last word. Unless you have something that you would like to add before we adjourn. All right, thank you. We stand adjourned.